Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, David here and welcome back to another video. And for today's video, we're going to discuss something that has been on my mind when it comes to Atlus and Nintendo, more specifically Nintendo Switch 2 or Nintendo's next hardware, because I know that for a lot of reasons, Atlus will go hard with their support on Nintendo Switch 2, and that's going back to an old video that I made on the channel like 4 years ago or so in 2020 when I first made the channel, discussing how Atlus should change their Switch support, and it really happened throughout the life of the Switch. But now that the Switch is doing well, now that Atlus is supporting the system and everything, I'm confident about what's next for Atlus and Nintendo. So if you are new to the channel, you'd like to stay up to date on all things when it comes to Atlus and Atlus news, you're at the right place. Make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell as well. Otherwise, a quick thumbs up is always a big help. Now let's get right into it. And what I want to do today is I want to go over what Atlus did on Switch very briefly, because we're going to notice a tendency here that's going to give us an idea of what Atlus is going to do with Switch 2. Then we'll discuss what Atlus did on Switch and how those games performed sales-wise for the company. And we're going to discuss rumors and leaks from, who is it from? From Midori, of course, which she was very vocal about both Sega and Atlus and the Nintendo Switch 2. So let's get right into it. And what I'm going to do first is we're going to go over the Switch. So again, what I want to say here is Atlus, when the Switch first launched, they were MIA, because Nintendo just got done with the Wii U, which was a crazy failure for Nintendo. Atlus only had one game on Wii U, and that was Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which I doubt did very well on the system. So in 2017, when the Switch launched, Atlus had no games for it. In 2018, Atlus had no games for it. In 2019, Atlus had no games for it. Plus, we learned that Persona 3 Reload started development in 2019, and Metaphor ReFantazio also started full-speed development in 2019 when it was known as Project ReFantasy, and both these games were not planned for Switch. That's in 2019, so no games, two massive games starting development that are not getting Switch versions. Now, it gets interesting in 2020, because in 2020, Animal Crossing came out in March, and, you know, end of 2019, everyone knew like how big the Switch was going to be. Like, oh my god, it's doing crazy well, it's breaking records, not only in Japan, but across the board, both for software sales, but also for console sales. So we knew that the system would do well. Obviously, Sega and Atlus noticed, and they started to support the system. So in 2020, they released two games. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharpay Fiancore got a port from the Wii U that was published by Nintendo, obviously with Atlus development in there. You have Catherine Full Body as well, which got a port in 2020, a year after the original release on PS4, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe that was 2018. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And then in 2021, it started to get very interesting, because we moved from 2 games to 3 games releasing on Switch, with Persona 5 Strikers, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remastered, and of course, Nintendo's big exclusive Shin Megami Tensei 5. In 2022, we saw the release of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax got a port on Nintendo for the 25th of Persona. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim as well got a port from Vanillaware to Nintendo Switch. That was a 2020 game, so a 2 years late port. A 2020 game came on Switch with 13 Sentinels. And of course, the year ended with Persona 5 Royal, one of the most requested ports of all time when it comes to the Switch itself. Like, people were crying for Persona 5 Royal. People were crying for a 100 hours RPG to take on the go with their Switch. That was before, you know, the Steam Deck and all of these other competitors arrived. Now, in 2023, we got one collection of 3 games with Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection. We had a new Persona 5 spin-off, Persona 5 Tactica, and we got Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden ported to Switch. So that's 4 games in 2023 coming out on the Nintendo Switch. So You see, we started with 0 games, then we moved to 2 games, 3 games, and now we're at 4 games in 2023. And when you look at 2024, we just got Unicorn Overlord, which I am playing right now, and it's so good from Vanillaware on the Switch. It's obviously on other platforms as well. Those are not all exclusive. And in June, we're gonna get a new version of SMT5, which is not exclusive anymore, which that's a good in my book. SMT5 Vengeance coming out in June of this year with Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor skipping the platform that are also in Atlus's lineup for 2024. Now, when you look at all these games that they released on Switch, the first one to point out is SMT5, because SMT5 was a game that was developed for Switch. It was an exclusive for the longest time. I'm glad that it's now coming out on other platforms and more people will get to play it. But where I want to get at with this is SMT5 as an exclusive game on Switch sold 1 million copies as of April of 2022. So that's 5 months, roughly 5 months after SMT5 dropped on Switch, it sold 1 million. If you guys didn't know, no mainline SMT games before sold 1 million. So SMT5 breaking the records in 5 months on one platform alone was extremely impressive. And I'm confident that SMT5 Vengeance will do very well as well when it releases this year. Nocturne HD, which released earlier in 2021, sold over 600,000 copies. That was announced in the Sega fiscal report. Now, we don't know the split from PC, PS4 to Switch, but when it comes to the first week of sales in Japan, it sold 60k physical copies only on Switch. So very, very good numbers for Nocturne HD Remastered, and I'm confident that we'll get more of these remasters in the future because of that. 13 Sentinels sold 500,000 copies from 2020 to 2022 on the PlayStation 4. It was an exclusive before. It got a port in 2022 on the Switch, and a couple of months after that, they announced that the game sold 1 million copies. So the Switch gave it a big push in a short amount of time. All of that to say that obviously Atlus games are doing well on different platforms. Reload sold 1 million without the Switch, so it's not dependent on Switch, but it would be a lie to say that Atlus games don't perform on Switch and that the Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 wouldn't give a push to Atlus's business. Now, the Nintendo Switch 2, for the reasons that we just mentioned, I'm confident Atlus will be there day one. Now the Switch is almost the best-selling system of all time at this point, and the Nintendo Switch 2 is rumored to be basically a Switch 2, not a different type of platform, a handheld device with docking capabilities, so it's safe to say that it's gonna do very well. Atlus wants to invest in the Switch 2, and I'm confident about that for what they did on the Switch and what they ported to Switch after a couple of years of silence. Midori is the leaker who keeps leaking a bunch of Sega and Atlus stuff. She leaked so much. She leaked Tactica, she leaked Reload, Tactica DLC, she leaked The Answer, the expansion pass for Reload before it happened. She's leaking dates for announcements and everything. It's insane how accurate her track record is. I've never seen anything like this in my content creation career, especially when it comes to Atlus, because Atlus's biggest leaker used to be Atlus themselves, but now it's Midori. She's always saying a lot of stuff, and she had a lot to say when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 and Atlus games. So it started in January of 2022 when Midori replied to a tweet talking about Reload and the Nintendo Switch, someone quoting an article. Midori replied with, "Because Persona 3 Reload will be on the next Nintendo hardware, and Metaphor too." That was in January of this year. In February, she did a tweet pointing to a Windows site listing for Metaphor ReFantazio dates, which had placeholder dates. We reported on that before in an Atlus News episode. Someone replied to that tweet, "Switch?" And then Midori replied, "Switch too." So that was her second time saying that Metaphor and Persona 3 Reload are gonna be on Switch 2, because she also replied to another reply on that tweet asking P3R getting a Switch 2 release as well, and she said, "Yep, that's late February of this year." In early February, she said something very interesting as well, talking about not only Atlus but also Sega, saying, quote, "The new Jet Set Radio game is not a remake. The game is a reboot that will be released in 2026. A remastered version of Jet Set Radio was also planned. It is a typo. It was originally going to have a release in 2027, but the game has changed since it started development. There is an initiative to reboot many Sega games in new ways." She says the titles that were at the Game Awards event are coming to Nintendo's next hardware. So talking about Jet Set Radio, there was Golden Axe, I'm forgetting the other games, Crazy Taxi, all those games, right? That is Sega stuff, which again, Sega owns Atlus. So if the business decision at Sega is to port all their new projects to Switch 2, I think it's a fair thing to say that Atlus is going to do the same thing, or at least something similar. In March of this year, on March 15th, another YouTuber called Spawnwave hosts a podcast called Direct Xbox and has an industry insider in his podcast called Nate the Hate. Great show. I recommend it if you guys are interested. I listen to this podcast. It's great stuff. And on that episode, Nate said that Persona 6 is going to release on Xbox and other platforms day and date. So that to me said, okay, so it's safe to say it's getting a Metaphor ReFantazio type of release, right? So it's going to be on Xbox Series, on PC, and PlayStation. Nintendo will have to see. And then Midori replied to Spawnwave's tweet saying, it is correct information, and multiple platforms too. Which that was intriguing to me because of what Nate said in the podcast, her saying multiple platforms. And of course, Nathan, friend of the channel, also replied saying, does that include the Switch too? Yeah. So at this point, if we believe Midori, which her track record is to be believed, but it is still a rumor as long as Atlus does not confirm it, but that would mean that Persona 3 Reload is going to be ported to Switch, Metaphor ReFantazio will release on Switch, obviously talking about the second console, right, Switch 2, and Persona 6 as well, which in a business sense would make a lot of sense, but as a fan of Atlus, as a fan of Nintendo, but most importantly a fan of multi-platform, this is great news for everyone involved. And I'm very excited for the future of both Atlus and Nintendo Switch 2. So thank you all so much for watching today's video, y'all. Would you be excited for any of these titles to release on Nintendo's next hardware? Make sure you drop a comment. And if you like the video, a thumbs up is always a big help. Thank you so much for watching, y'all. You have a great day. Bye.